3 years ago, your neighbor introduced his wife, a pale figure who vanished into their house like a ghost. You never saw her again, until today. She stood outside, her skin like ash, her eyes hollow, staring at the ground as he dragged her back inside. Now as you sit in your quiet home, the hum of his truck fading down the street, you can't shake the question, what's he hiding behind that locked door? And why does it feel like she's screaming for help without a sound? The street I live on is the kind of place where everyone minds their own business. Neat lawns, identical mailboxes, the hum of sprinklers in the summer heat. It's a postcard of suburban calm. But 3 years ago, when I moved into my modest 2-bedroom house, I met my neighbor Nathan. He was leaning on his porch railing, a joint dangling from his fingers. The air around him thick with the sweet, skunky scent of weed. He waved me over, his grin too wide, his eyes too sharp. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, then gestured to a woman standing behind him. "This is my wife, Clara." She was thin, her skin pale as moonlight, her dark hair falling in limp strands over her face. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just stared at the porch floor before slipping back, inside the door closing with a soft thud. That was the last I saw of her for 3 years. You think you know your neighbors, don't you? But some houses keep secrets you're not meant to see. Nathan was a fixture on that porch, day after day, his presence as constant as the sun. Didn't work as far as I could tell, yet his life seemed to hum with activity. Women came and went, different ones, always in a hurry, their faces unfamiliar. I wondered if Clara was a lie, a story he told to keep up appearances. Or maybe she'd left, escaping whatever life he offered. The thought nagged at me, but I pushed it down, telling myself it wasn't my place. Still, Nathan's habits gnawed at my curiosity. He owned 4 vehicles, a battered red SUV, a sleek pickup, a nondescript van, and a shiny new silver SUV. But only one was ever parked at the house at a time. They rotated like clockwork, a different one each day or week, their engines rumbling, at odd hours. It was strange for a man who seemed to do nothing but smoke and stare. What's he driving away from? Or who? Yesterday, everything changed. I was pulling into my driveway, the afternoon sun glinting off my windshield when I saw her. Clara. She stood on their front lawn, her figure so frail it seemed the breeze might topple her. Her skin was ghostly, almost translucent. Her eyes, sunken and fixed on the ground. She swayed slightly, her hands trembling, as if the act of standing took all her strength. My breath caught, a chill prickling my skin despite the warmth. She looked like she hadn't seen daylight in years, like something drained of life. Before I could process it, Nathan appeared, his face tight, his movements quick. He grabbed her arm, not roughly but with purpose, and steered her back inside. The door shut, and the silence that followed felt heavy, wrong. You saw her, didn't you, and now you can't unsee her. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the wheel, my mind racing. Was she sick, disabled, or something worse? Kept, hidden, trapped? The image of her hollow eyes burned into me, a silent plea I couldn't ignore. That night I lay awake, the hum of crickets outside my window drowned out by questions. Why hadn't I seen her in 3 years? Why did Nathan rush her inside? And those cars, why the constant switching? I remembered a friend's story, years ago, about a neighbor who seemed normal until police found a woman locked in his basement. She'd been there for years, unnoticed, while the world moved on. The thought made my stomach twist, my heart pounding in the dark. You have to do something. You can't just wait. The next morning I acted. I posted about it online, vague but urgent, seeking advice. The responses were unanimous. Call for a welfare check. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the phone, but Clara's face pushed me forward. I dialed the non-emergency line, my voice steady as I explained what I'd seen. Her pallor, her absence, Nathan's haste. The officer listened, his tone calm but serious, and scheduled a check for the next day when I'd be out of town. But I couldn't stop there. Something drove me to dig deeper, to confirm my suspicions. I started watching Nathan's vehicles, noting their plates. On a whim, I ran the numbers for the red SUV and the van through an online database. My blood ran cold. Neither plate matched the vehicle it was on. One was registered to a sedan in another state, the other to a scrapped truck. "What are you hiding, Nathan?" I reached out to a friend, a cop named Mark, through a mutual acquaintance. Over coffee, I laid it all out. Clara's disappearance, her sudden reappearance, the mismatched plates, the rotating cars. Mark's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Sounds like he's covering something," he said, leaning forward. "Could be small time, could be worse." He suggested a plan. The next time Nathan drove out, a patrol car would pull him over for the plate issue, keeping him occupied while another officer checked on Clara. It was clean, discreet, but the wait felt like torture. I gave Mark every detail I had, my voice shaking as I described Clara's trembling hands, her vacant stare. He promised to follow, up to keep me posted. But as I left the cafe, the weight of it all settled on me. You're in too deep now. There's no turning back. Now I'm home. The street outside quiet. Nathan's porch empty. His silver SUV is gone, replaced by the van. Its windows tinted black. I keep checking my phone, waiting for Mark's call, for any news. But the silence is deafening, broken only by the creak of my chair, the hum of my fridge. I can't shake. The feeling that I've stirred something, that Nathan knows I'm watching. Last night I dreamed of Clara, her face pressed against a window, her mouth open in a scream that made no sound. I woke gasping, my heart racing, the image lingering, like a bruise. You can't ignore her now, she needs you. I don't know what the welfare check will find. Maybe Clara's sick, and I've misread it all. Maybe Nathan's just the eccentric with bad habits, but the cars, the plates, the way he moved her inside, it doesn't add up. And deep down, I feel it. Something's wrong in that house. Something dark and hidden. I'll update when I hear from Mark, when I know Clara's safe. But for now, I sit in my living room, the curtains drawn, and I wonder, what's behind that door? And if I'm right, what will it cost to find out? Look closer. The truth is waiting. Some homes are more than walls and windows. They're gateways to something darker, something that watches when you think you're alone. 5 years ago, I found myself tangled in a relationship that was as intoxicating as it was unsettling, with a girl named Mara who seemed to live on the edge of chaos. She was a paradox, her smile warm and inviting one moment, her temper a storm that could erupt without warning the next. Her house mirrored her, a labyrinth of shadows, its walls adorned with twisted paintings that seemed to shift in the corner of your eye, their figures contorted in silent screams. On her coffee table sat a satanic Bible, its leather cover worn and cracked. A book she treated with a reverence that sent a chill down my spine. I should have seen the signs, should have known that her darkness would draw something worse, but love, even the reckless kind, has a way of blinding you to the truth. Mara and I had been together for a few months, our nights often spent in her dimly lit bedroom, the air thick with the scent of incense and the flicker of candles she kept burning into the early hours. We were lying in bed one evening, the glow of the television casting a pale light across the room, a movie playing softly in the background as we relaxed, our bodies close, our laughter a fragile shield against the world outside. I felt a dryness, in my throat, a need for something cold to drink, so I slipped out from under the covers, my bare feet brushing against the cool hardwood floor as I made my way downstairs. The kitchen was a cavern of shadows, the only light coming from a small bulb above the stove, its faint glow barely reaching the edges of the room. I opened the fridge, the cold air a shock against my skin, and reached for a soda. The bottle, icy in my hand as I closed the door with a gentle nudge. As I turned to head back, something stopped me. A presence, heavy and unyielding, that seemed to fill the space around me. I froze, my heart lurching in my chest, as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. There, just beyond the stove, stood a shadow, taller than I was, its form a void that seemed to absorb the faint glow around it. It wasn't a trick of the light, not a reflection. It was real, a silhouette that stood between me and the doorway, its edges sharp and unnatural, as if carved from the darkness itself. My breath caught, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin, and I took a step back, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. The air grew colder, a chill that seeped into my bones, and for a moment I thought I saw it move, a subtle shift that sent my heart into a frantic rhythm. I blinked, trying to dispel the vision, but it remained, unyielding, a silent sentinel that watched me with an intensity I couldn't escape. I stumbled back to the bedroom, my legs trembling, the soda bottle still clutched in my hand, its cold surface grounding me against the terror that threatened to overwhelm me. Mara looked up as I entered, her eyes narrowing at the expression on my face, a mix of fear and confusion I couldn't hide. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with something I couldn't place. I hesitated, the words caught in my throat, but the weight of what I'd seen forced them out. "I saw something in the kitchen," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. A shadow, tall, just standing there. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't gasp, didn't question me. She simply nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips as if I'd confirmed something she already knew. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said, her tone calm, almost reverent. "The shadow guy. I've seen him since I was a child. He's nothing to worry about." Her words should have reassured me, but they didn't. They deepened the unease that had taken root in my chest, a creeping dread that whispered I was in over my head. Mara went back to watching the movie, her demeanor unchanged, as if the presence of a shadow in her house was as normal as the flickering light of the candles. But I couldn't shake the image, the way it had stood there watching me, its silence more terrifying than any sound could have been. Our relationship lasted 8 months in total, a roller coaster of highs and lows. But that house, her house, became a place of quiet terror for me. When we fought, the air would shift, a heaviness settling over us like a storm waiting to break. I'd hear footsteps on the stairs, a slow, deliberate rhythm that echoed through the house, even when we were the only ones there. Once during a heated argument, a loud crash came from the upstairs bathroom, the sound of glass shattering against tile, and we found the soaps and shampoos scattered across the floor, their shelves untouched, as if an unseen hand had swept them away. Mara never flinched at these occurrences, her calm a stark contrast to the fear that gripped me. She'd shrug, her eyes distant, and say it was just the house, just the shadow guy, as if that explained everything. But to me, it explained nothing. It only deepened the mystery, the terror of what I'd seen that night in the kitchen. I've carried that moment with me ever since, a memory that surfaces in the quiet hours, a question that haunts me still. What was it I saw in Mara's house? A ghost, a manifestation of her darkness, or something else entirely? The uncertainty, gnaws at me a shadow of its own, and I wonder if I'll ever truly know the truth of the unseen guest that lingered in her home, watching, waiting, a silent witness to our unraveling. The darkness in my daughter's room wasn't empty. It held something that watched them sleep. I learned that truth on a quiet May night in 2025 in our old house on Willow Lane, a place I'd once thought was a sanctuary. Sophie, my 16-year-old, and Lily, my 10-year-old, shared a room at the end of the hall, its walls painted a soft lavender, its shelves lined with stuffed animals and books. But that night the air felt different, heavy with a chill that seeped through the floorboards, a warning I couldn't ignore. Step into that room with me. Feel the shadows press against you. It began with Sophie. She came to me one evening, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. "Mom, there's something in our room," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the dishwasher downstairs. "You've heard that tone, haven't you? The kind that carries fear too real to dismiss." She described it. A tall, thin figure, its skin a sickly gray, its eyes large and black like pools of ink that swallowed the light. It had reached out from the closet, its long bony fingers wiggling toward her, then peeked around the door, watching her with a curiosity that wasn't human. "It looked surprised," she said, her voice breaking. But then it hit again, like it didn't want me to see it. I wanted to dismiss it as a nightmare, a trick of her tired mind, but the way her eyes darted to the hallway, the way her breath hitched, told me this was no dream. Lily confirmed it the next night without ever hearing Sophie's story. Feel that dread now, the way it creeps up your spine, undeniable. She woke me with a scream, her small body curled into a ball on her bed, her finger pointing at the door. "It's there, Mom," she sobbed, her voice raw with terror. "The gray thing with big eyes. It's looking at me." I froze, my heart pounding as she described the same creature, tall and gaunt, its skin like ash, its eyes black and endless, peering over the doorframe. She said it sometimes changed, its bald head sprouting long dark hair like mine, its face shifting to mimic Sophie's sharp cheekbones or Aunt Nora's soft jawline. You've seen something like that, haven't you? A shadow that wears a familiar face but twists it into something wrong. I turned on the light, flooding the room with a harsh white glow. But the doorframe was empty, the air still heavy with that unexplainable chill. The girls clung to me, their breaths shallow, their eyes wide with a fear I couldn't soothe. I checked the closet, the space under the beds, every corner, but found nothing, just the lingering scent of damp earth, a smell that didn't belong in their room. Smell it now, let it fill your senses, that hint of something ancient, something wrong. The stuffed animals on the shelves seemed to watch us, their glass eyes reflecting the light in a way that made my skin crawl. The lavender walls, once so comforting, now felt like a mask, hiding something darker beneath. The next day, my mother, Eleanor, came over, her love for ghost stories a family tradition. We sat in the kitchen, the girls playing in the living room, their laughter a stark contrast to the night before. I told her what they'd seen, expecting her to laugh, to call it childish imagination. Let me take you back to a night I've tried to forget. When I was a girl, Eleanor had told me about a house she lived in, a place where she'd heard footsteps in the attic, where she'd seen a shadow move across the wall, a shadow with no source. I'd laughed then, but now, her face was serious, her eyes sharp with recognition. "They're seeing the same thing," she said, her voice low. "That's not imagination, Amelia, that's real." Sophie overheard us, her curiosity drawing her in. Before I could stop her, she blurted out her story, her words tumbling over each other. Lily, unprompted, chimed in, her small voice steady, as she described the creature again, her details matching Sophie's perfectly. The gray skin, the black eyes, the shifting face. Feel that realization, the way it sinks in, heavy and cold. My heart sank, the weight of their words pressing against my chest. They hadn't spoken to each other, hadn't shared their fears, yet they'd seen the same thing, felt the same terror. Eleanor's hand tightened around her coffee mug, her knuckles white. "You need to get it out," she said, her voice firm. "Whatever it is, it's not safe." I knew she was right. You'd feel it too, wouldn't you? That need to protect, to fight the unseen. The thing in their room wasn't a dream, wasn't a shadow. It was real, and it was watching my girls. Its presence a violation I couldn't ignore. I don't know what it is, what it wants, but I know this. I'll find a way to banish it, to make their room a sanctuary again, no matter what it takes. Some fears don't fade, do they? They linger, waiting for you to face them. Some rooms don't just hold secrets. They breathe them into your nightmares. Elise stood at the foot of the narrow staircase, her gaze locked on the attic door above, its crimson paint glowing faintly in the dim light of the hallway. It was the summer of 2021, and she and Nathan had just settled into their new home. A quaint 1950s house in a sleepy suburb, its walls whispering stories of decades past. But the attic room, drenched in a blood-red hue that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, filled her with an unshakable dread from the moment she laid eyes on it. Step into the crimson glow, feel its weight on your soul. The walls seemed to absorb the light, casting an unnatural sheen that made her stomach churn, as if the room was watching her, waiting for her to cross its threshold. Elise had felt the unease the day they moved in. A cold prickle at the back of her neck that she couldn't explain. Picture a young woman full of hope, stepping into a house that feels alive with malice. She and Nathan had dreamed of this place, a cozy haven to start their life together, filled with the promise of laughter and shared dreams. But the attic tainted that vision, its presence a dark stain on their happiness. She tried to ignore it, keeping the door shut, avoiding the staircase that led to its crimson embrace. Nathan dismissed her fears, his practical mind chalking it up to the house's age. But Elise knew better. The attic wasn't just a room, it was a predator, its red walls a heartbeat she could feel through the floorboards, a constant reminder that something ancient and restless lived within. The first incident came on a quiet night, as Elise lay in their downstairs bedroom, the darkness wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Listen to the silence, hear what shouldn't be there. She was on the edge of sleep, her mind drifting, when a soft, feminine voice sliced through the stillness, clear and close, as if someone leaned over her. "Elise," it whispered, the sound brushing her left ear like a cold finger tracing her skin. Her eyes snapped open, her heart slamming against her ribs as she bolted upright, her gaze darting around the room. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting faint shadows on the walls, but there was nothing. No figure, no movement, just the steady rise and fall of Nathan's breathing beside her. "What's wrong?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep, but Elise couldn't speak, her throat tight with panic. Feel the whisper linger, a name that binds you to the dark. She tried to convince herself it was a dream, a trick of her exhausted mind. But the voice returned the next night, this time from the hallway outside their door. "Hello," it said, its tone soft yet piercing, as if it knew her deepest fears, as if it wanted her to answer. The disturbances grew more frequent, each one more invasive, more real. Elise found herself avoiding the upstairs after dark, her steps quickening as she passed the staircase, her eyes avoiding the attic door that seemed to watch her every move. But one evening, as she sat at her vanity in the office next to the attic, removing her makeup after a long day. The air shifted, growing heavy with an unspoken presence. Turn your head. Feel the room hold its breath. The door to the crimson attic was closed. She'd checked it twice, but a faint creak filled the silence, slow and deliberate, like the house itself was stirring. The door swung open, its hinges groaning in protest, revealing the blood-red interior that seemed to pulse in the dim light, a living thing that beckoned her closer. Elise's heart leapt into her throat, her reflection in the mirror pale and wide-eyed, her hands trembling. As she dropped the makeup wipe, the attic's red glow seemed to reach for her, its walls shimmering with an unnatural heat, as if something inside was awakening, hungry for her fear. She fled downstairs, her bare feet cold against the hardwood, her pulse roaring in her ears, as she hurried to find Nathan in their bedroom. The house was dark, the lights off, but she'd heard his footsteps just moments before, or so she thought. As she passed the kitchen, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A tall, shadowy figure gliding past the window, its silhouette stark against the moonlight streaming through the glass. Freeze where you stand. Feel its gaze pierce through you. Elise's breath hitched, her body trembling as she whispered, "Nathan?" But the figure didn't answer. Its shape too vague, too unnatural to be human. Its presence a cold weight that pressed against her chest. She stumbled into the bedroom, her voice shaking as she called out again, only to find Nathan fast asleep, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of deep slumber. "How long have you been asleep?" she asked, shaking him awake, her voice edged with hysteria. He blinked, confused, glancing at his watch. "A couple of hours," he murmured, his brow furrowing. Elise's blood ran cold, her hands trembling as she turned to face the kitchen doorway. It wasn't him. It was never him. The terror reached its peak that same night, as Elise and Nathan lay in bed, the room cloaked in a darkness that felt alive. She tried to calm her racing heart, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her mind replaying the shadow's movement over and over. Then, without warning, a tall, shadowy figure materialized beside Nathan's side of the bed, its form towering over him, its edges blurred yet unnervingly solid. Look into the void. See what shouldn't exist. Elise's scream tore through the silence, raw and primal, her hands clutching Nathan as she pulled him awake, her voice breaking with terror. "There's someone here!" she cried, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking uncontrollably. Nathan jumped up, his movements frantic as he searched the room, checking under the bed, behind the curtains. But the figure was gone, vanished into the night like a ghost. Before they could speak, a deafening thud shook the floor on Nathan's side, as if something heavy had been dropped, the sound reverberating through the house like a thunderclap. Feel the house tremble, as if it's alive with fury. Nathan's face drained of color, his skepticism shattered in an instant. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice trembling for the first time since they'd moved in, his hands gripping hers as if she were the only anchor in a storm. They moved their bedroom to another part of the house the next day, turning the old room into a storage space they rarely entered, hoping distance would shield them from the attic's reach. Picture a couple fleeing the dark, clinging to fragile hope. The incidents lessened, the voice fell silent, the shadows retreated, but the crimson attic remained a scar on their peace, its presence a constant reminder of the terror they'd endured. The door to the attic still opened on its own, its hinges groaning in the night, the red interior a silent taunt that seemed to mock their attempts at normalcy. Elise would stand at the bottom of the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest, and speak into the darkness, her voice firm despite the fear that clawed at her throat. "You're not welcome here," she'd say, her words a desperate plea, a fragile shield against the unknown. Feel the Red Room listening, its whisper waiting for the right moment. The house stayed quiet, but Elise knew the truth. Some rooms never let go, their secrets woven into the walls, their whispers a promise of terrors yet to come, a crimson heartbeat that echoed through her dreams. Your children are asleep, their room a sanctuary of soft blankets and glowing nightlights. But tonight they wake, eyes wide, whispering of a tall, gray thing with black, endless eyes watching from the shadows. It wears your face, your hair, your fear. You tell them it's a dream, but deep down you feel it too. A presence that lingers, waiting for you to look. And when you do, you'll wish you hadn't. The house we call home is a quiet refuge, tucked in a cul-de-sac where the streetlights hum and the neighbors wave. It's a place of routine, dinner at 6, bedtime stories at 8, the soft creak of the stairs as I check on my daughters before bed. Lily, my 16-year-old, is all sharp wit and teenage defiance, while Emma, my 9-year-old, is a dreamer. Her room a kaleidoscope of drawings and stuffed animals. For weeks they've been different, quieter, their laughter muted, their eyes darting to corners when they think I'm not looking. It started with whispers, fragments of fear they didn't want to share. But last night, under the dim glow of their bedside lamp, they told me about the thing in their room. You think your home is safe, don't you? But some things slip through the cracks, unnoticed until they're too close. Lily spoke first, her voice low as if afraid it might hear. "It's tall, Dad," she said, her hands twisting the hem of her pajama shirt. "Gray, like ash, with these huge black eyes that don't blink. It's weird. Sometimes it's bald, but other times it has hair like yours, long and dark. Or it looks like Emma's face or Aunt Sarah's." Emma nodded, her small frame curled against her sister, her eyes wide. "It watches us," she whispered. "From the closet or above the door. It doesn't move much, but it's always there." My stomach churned, a cold dread settling in my chest. I wanted to dismiss it, to call it a shared nightmare, but the way their voices trembled, the way they clung to each other, it was too real. You feel it now, don't you? The weight of something wrong. Lily's first encounter was 3 weeks ago. She was up late, scrolling on her phone, the room lit only by its blue glow. The closet door was cracked open, a habit she'd never broken. She felt a prickle, like someone staring, and looked up. A long gray arm slid from the closet, its fingers unnaturally thin, wiggling as if testing the air. She froze, her breath shallow as a head peeked out, gray, hairless, with black eyes that gleamed like oil. It stared, its expression almost startled, then ducked back when she blinked. "I thought I was tired," she said, her voice shaking. "But it wasn't a dream, Dad. It was there." Emma's story came next, unprompted, her words spilling out. She'd woken one night, the room dark except for the nightlight's faint glow. Above the door it crouched, its gray form folded impossibly, those eyes locked on her. When she gasped, it vanished, leaving only a faint whisper, like leaves rustling in a language she couldn't grasp. "You want to look now, don't you? To prove it's not there." I sat on Lily's bed, my heart pounding, their words painting a picture I couldn't unsee. The thing hadn't hurt them, not yet, but its presence was a violation, a stain on the safety I'd built for them. I remembered a story my mother told years ago about a house she'd lived in as a child. She'd hear whispers at night, see shadows that moved wrong, always in her room. She'd laughed it off, but her eyes were haunted when she spoke. "Some places hold things," she'd said, "things that watch." I'd dismissed it then, But now, with my daughter's fear filling the air, it felt too close, too real. You can't ignore it anymore. It's in your home. The next day, my mother visited, her presence a comfort amid the unease. Over coffee, we talked about ghosts, a topic she loved. Lily hesitated, then shared her story, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could finish, Emma piped up, her eyes bright with urgency. Was it tall and gray, with big black eyes? She asked, describing the same creature down to the way it mimicked their aunt's face. Lily's jaw dropped, her hand gripping mine. They hadn't spoken to each other about it, not a word. Yet their stories matched perfectly. My mother's face paled, her coffee cup trembling. You need to do something, she said, her voice firm. That's not a ghost. It's something else. You know she's right. You have to act. That night I stood in their room, the air heavy, the silence oppressive. The closet door was shut, the night light casting long shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I listened, my ears straining, and there it was, a faint whisper, not words but a cadence like a voice trapped in static. My skin crawled, my pulse racing. I spoke, my voice loud in the quiet. This is my house, I said, my words more for myself than the thing. You're not welcome here, leave my daughters alone. The whisper stopped, the air lightening, but the relief was fleeting. I knew it wasn't gone, not really. You feel it watching, don't you? Waiting for you to turn away. I'm determined to end this. I've called a friend, a woman who knows about these things, cleansings, protections, whatever it takes. She's coming tomorrow, armed with sage and prayers to drive it out. But first I need to know what it is. Is it a spirit, a demon, something older? The whispers, the shifting faces, they're not random. It's studying us, learning us, wearing our skins like a mask. I've told Lily and Emma to sleep in my room tonight. Their beds pushed against mine, their nightlight burning bright. But as I write this, my hands shake, the memory of those whispers clawing at my mind. I keep glancing at the door, half expecting to see it, gray, lanky, with my face staring back. You'll look, won't you? And when you do, it'll know you're... Dame, I won't let it stay. Whatever it is, wherever it came from, it doesn't belong here. My daughters deserve to sleep without fear, to live without shadows. I'll fight it, with words, with rituals, with everything I have. But deep down I wonder, what if it's already part of us? What if it's been here all along, waiting for us to notice? Close your eyes, but it's still there, watching, always watching. The wilderness of Alaska doesn't forgive and it doesn't forget. It watches, waiting for you to falter. I grew up in its frozen embrace, a child of the Brooks Range, where the land stretches endless and unforgiving, its beauty as cruel as it is vast. From a young age I learned to navigate its secrets, hunting caribou under the midnight sun, dressing game with hands steady against the cold, building shelters from the bones of the earth, and tracing my path by the constellations that glittered like shards of ice in the sky. But there are things in the wild that no amount of skill can prepare you for, things that lurk beyond the edge of reason, waiting to remind you that you're never truly alone. In the winter of 2017, I found one of those things, and it's a memory that clings to me, a shadow I can't outrun. I was alone that season, my trap line stretching along the left side of a valley, heading northbound through the snow-dusted expanse of the Brooks Range. Each trap was set miles apart, a silent promise of survival in a land that offered none freely. I'd ridden out on my snowmobile, the machine's hum a steady companion against the stillness of the January cold, my parka heavy with the weight of the frost that clung to its edges. The air was sharp, cutting into my lungs with every breath. But the day had been calm, warmer than expected for the heart of winter, the snow underfoot glinting like crushed diamonds in the pale light. I was scanning the horizon, my eyes tracing the line of diamond willows a mile ahead, their gnarled branches a stark contrast against the white. When I saw it, a figure moving through the thicket, its silhouette dark and deliberate, walking with the steady gait of a man. My heart skipped, a jolt of unease cutting through the calm. Who would be out here, in the dead of winter, walking through the wilds like they belonged? I pulled out my binoculars, the cold metal biting into my gloved hands, and focused on the figure, expecting to see a hunter or a trapper, someone like me braving the cold for necessity. But as I watched, the figure vanished, swallowed by the willows as if it had never been, leaving nothing but the empty expanse of snow and shadow. I lowered the binoculars, my breath fogging in the air, and tried to convince myself it was nothing. A casual trick of the light, a snowmobile rider who'd moved out of sight. But the unease lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind, and I pressed on, my snowmobile carving a path through the untouched snow toward my next trap. The land was still, the kind of stillness that feels alive, as if the earth itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. At the next trap, I stopped, shutting off the engine, the sudden quiet, a weight that pressed against my ears. The air was still warm for January, the snow soft beneath my boots as I shed my parka, its weight a burden in the unexpected mildness. I knelt to reset the spring trap, my hands steady as I worked, the familiar rhythm grounding me against the unease that still lingered. But then, a sound drifted down from the small valley above, a low, resonant bellow, faint at first, like a human voice calling out in the distance. My hands froze, the trap forgotten, as I strained to listen, the sound growing deeper, more primal, a growl that echoed like a bear warning off arrival. But it was January. Bears didn't roam in the dead of winter, their bodies buried in the sleep of hibernation, and even the wolves and wolverines that might wander this far north wouldn't make a sound like that. The bellow came again, louder, now, a vibration that seemed to ripple through the ground beneath me, shaking the snow from the branches above. My heart raced, a primal fear taking root in my chest as I felt it. Eyes on me, a gaze so intense it burned into my skin, its source unseen but undeniable. I turned toward the valley, my binoculars forgotten, my eyes scanning the empty expanse of snow and shadow, searching for the figure I'd seen earlier, for anything that could explain the sound, the feeling. But there was nothing, just the endless white, the trees standing silent, their branches heavy with frost. The air grew heavier, the silence a living thing that wrapped around me, suffocating in its intensity, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that I wasn't alone. I couldn't ignore it any longer, couldn't pretend it was just the wind or my imagination. The bellowing returned, a sound that clawed at the edges of reality, and I did something I'd been taught never to do. I responded. I let out a sound of my own, a deep, resonant call that echoed through the valley, a mimicry of the noise that had shaken me. The moment my voice faded, the bellowing stopped, abrupt and final, as if whatever was out there had heard me, recognized me, and chosen to fall silent. The air shifted, the heaviness lifting, but the silence that followed was worse, eerie, unnatural, a void where the hum of life should have been. No birds, no wind, no distant rustle of a caribou herd. Just a stillness that felt like a warning, a command to leave and never return. I didn't hesitate. I packed up my gear, my hands trembling as I secured the trap, and climbed onto my snowmobile. The engines roar, a desperate plea against the silence. I rode out of that valley as fast as I could, the snow spraying around me, the cold air biting into my face as I fled. I abandoned that trap line that winter, pulling every marker I'd set, and I've never gone back, not even in the light of summer. The memory of that day lingers, a shadow that follows me through the years, a question I can't answer. What was out there, watching me, calling to me in the frozen wilds? I've hunted and trapped my whole life, faced dangers that would break most men. But nothing has ever pierced my soul like that unseen presence. Its gaze a weight I can still feel, a whisper in the dark that tells me I was never meant to see it, never meant to know. Some games open doors that should stay closed. I learned that lesson in the fall of 2012, when I was just a kid in junior high, caught up in the reckless curiosity of youth. My best friend Damien, a metalhead with a penchant for the dark and strange, invited me and a few others to his house for a weekend sleepover. His basement was our playground, a dim space cluttered with band posters and old furniture, the air thick with the scent of incense and teenage bravado. Step into that basement with me, feel the shadows press closer. That night, we played a game that changed everything. A game with a Ouija board. Damien had found the board in his attic, its wooden surface scratched and faded, the planchette stained with age. We gathered around it, 5 of us cross-legged, on the cold concrete floor, the flickering light of a single candle casting jagged shadows on the walls. You've felt that thrill, haven't you? The kind that dances on the edge of fear. Damien, with his black hoodie and silver rings, led the charge, his voice low and dramatic as he explained the rules. We were skeptics, giggling nervously, our fingers trembling on the planchette as we asked our first question. Who's here with us? The board was silent at first, the air heavy with anticipation, the incense smoke curling around us like a living thing. The planchette moved slowly, spelling out a name that made Damien smirk. Zarak. Sounds like a demon from a bad movie. He laughed, but his eyes darted to the corners of the room as if he felt something we didn't. Feel that unease now, the way it creeps into the silence. We asked silly questions next, teasing each other, until our friend Leo, a taekwondo competitor, asked about his upcoming tournament. Who's my opponent? He said, his voice half joking. The board spelled out Marika, a name none of us recognized. Leo shook his head, his brow furrowing. That's not right. My opponent's name is Jenna. We laughed it off, the candle flickering as if caught in a draft. The basement growing colder despite the closed windows. Monday morning brought a revelation that silenced our laughter. See it in your mind, the moment the impossible becomes real. Leo came to school, his face pale, his voice tight with disbelief. The tournament got rescheduled, he said, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. My new opponent, her name's Marika, just like the board said. The name was exact, down to the last letter, a detail none of us could have known. The air in the school hallway felt heavy, the chatter of our classmates fading as we exchanged looks, the memory of that name, Zarak, echoing in our minds. You felt that chill, haven't you? When the world shifts and you're standing on the edge of something dark. The weeks that followed were marked by a shadow we couldn't shake. Feel that weight now, the way it clings, unyielding. We were plagued by small, eerie misfortunes. Damien nearly got hit by a car in a parking lot, the driver swearing he hadn't seen him. My bike chain snapped on a quiet street, sending me sprawling into the gravel, my palms bloody and raw. Leo's locker at school jammed, spilling his books into a puddle, the pages ruined. Each incident felt deliberate, a warning we couldn't ignore, the air around us thick with a presence we couldn't name. You've sensed it too, haven't you? That feeling of being watched, of being marked. The worst came for Isabel, Damien's older sister. Let me take you to that night. The one that broke us. She was in the living room, the TV casting a blue glow across her face, while Damien sat at his computer under the staircase, headphones on, oblivious to the world. Isabel glanced up, her eyes catching movement on the stairs. A pair of legs, black and coarse like a goat's, descending slowly, step by step. See them now, those legs. Unnatural, wrong, moving in the dim light. Her breath caught, her mind racing. Maybe it was her mom, maybe a costume. But as the legs reached the lower steps, she saw the truth. There was no body above them, just empty. Air, the legs moving on their own. Deliberate, purposeful. She screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the house, her body trembling as she curled into the couch, tears streaming down her face. Damien tore off his headphones, his face pale as he rushed to her. But he saw nothing. The stairs empty, the air heavy with her fear. We never touched the Ouija board again. Some doors, once opened, don't close easily, do they? I've carried that night with me, a warning etched into my bones. The board sits in Damien's attic still, untouched, but its shadow lingers, a reminder of what we invited in. You'd heed that warning, wouldn't you? Some games aren't worth playing. Some rooms don't just hold secrets, they breathe them into your nightmares. Elise stood at the foot of the narrow staircase, her gaze locked on the attic door above, its crimson paint glowing faintly in the dim light of the hallway. It was the summer of 2021, and she and Nathan had just settled into their new home. A quaint 1950s house in a sleepy suburb, its walls whispering stories of decades past. But the attic room, drenched in a blood-red hue that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, filled her with an unshakable dread from the moment she laid eyes on it. Step into the crimson glow, feel its weight on your soul. The walls seemed to absorb the light, casting an unnatural sheen that made her stomach churn, as if the room was watching her, waiting for her to cross its threshold. Elise had felt the unease the day they moved in. A cold prickle at the back of her neck that she couldn't explain. Picture a young woman full of hope, stepping into a house that feels alive with malice. She and Nathan had dreamed of this place, a cozy haven to start their life together, filled with the promise of laughter and shared dreams. But the attic tainted that vision, its presence a dark stain on their happiness. She'd tried to ignore it, keeping the door shut, avoiding the staircase that led to its crimson embrace. Nathan dismissed her fears, his practical mind chalking it up to the house's age, but Elise knew better. The attic wasn't just a room. It was a predator. Its red walls a heartbeat she could feel through the floorboards, a constant reminder that something ancient and restless lived within. The first incident came on a quiet night, as Elise lay in their downstairs bedroom, the darkness wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Listen to the silence. Hear what shouldn't be there. She was on the edge of sleep, her mind drifting, when a soft feminine voice sliced through the stillness, clear and close, as if someone leaned over her. Elise, it whispered, the sound brushing her left ear like a cold finger tracing her skin. Her eyes snapped open, her heart slamming against her ribs as she bolted upright, her gaze darting around the room. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting faint shadows on the walls, but there was nothing. No figure, no movement, just the steady rise and fall of Nathan's breathing beside her. "What's wrong?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep, but Elise couldn't speak, her throat tight with panic. Feel the whisper linger, a name that binds you to the dark. She tried to convince herself it was a dream, a trick of her exhausted mind, but the voice returned the next night, this time from the hallway outside their door. "Hello," it said, its tone soft yet piercing, as if it knew her deepest fears, as if it wanted her to answer. The disturbances grew more frequent, each one more invasive, more real. Elise found herself avoiding the upstairs after dark, her steps quickening as she passed the staircase, her eyes avoiding the attic door that seemed to watch her every move. But one evening, as she sat at her vanity in the office next to the attic, removing her makeup after a long day, the air shifted, growing heavy with an unspoken presence. Turn your head. Feel the room hold its breath. The door to the crimson attic was closed. She'd checked it twice, but a faint creak filled the silence, slow and deliberate, like the house itself was stirring. The door swung open, its hinges groaning in protest, revealing the blood-red interior that seemed to pulse in the dim light, a living thing that beckoned her closer. Elise's heart leapt into her throat, her reflection in the mirror pale and wide-eyed, her hands trembling as she dropped the makeup wipe. The attic's red glow seemed to reach for her, its walls shimmering with an unnatural heat, as if something inside was awakening, hungry for her fear. She fled downstairs, her bare feet cold against the hardwood, her pulse roaring in her ears, as she hurried to find Nathan in their bedroom. The house was dark, the lights off, but she'd heard his footsteps just moments before, or so she thought. As she passed the kitchen, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A tall, shadowy figure gliding past the window, its silhouette stark against the moonlight streaming through the glass. Freeze where you stand. Feel its gaze pierce through you. Elise's breath hitched, her body trembling as she whispered, "Nathan." But the figure didn't answer, its shape too vague, too unnatural to be human, its presence a cold weight that pressed against her chest. She stumbled into the bedroom, her voice shaking as she called out again, only to find Nathan fast asleep, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of deep slumber. "How long have you been asleep?" she asked, shaking him awake, her voice edged with hysteria. He blinked, confused, glancing at his watch. "A couple of hours," he murmured, his brow furrowing. Elise's blood ran cold, her hands trembling as she turned to face the kitchen doorway. It wasn't him. It was never him. The terror reached its peak that same night, as Elise and Nathan lay in bed, the room cloaked in a darkness that felt alive. She tried to calm her racing heart, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her mind replaying the shadow's movement over and over. Then, without warning, a tall, shadowy figure materialized beside Nathan's side of the bed, its form towering over him, its edges blurred yet unnervingly solid. Look into the void, see what shouldn't exist. Elise's scream tore through the silence, raw and primal, her hands clutching Nathan as she pulled him awake, her voice breaking with terror. "There's someone here," she cried, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking uncontrollably. Nathan jumped up, his movements frantic as he searched the room, checking under the bed, behind the curtains. But the figure was gone, vanished into the night like a ghost. Before they could speak, a deafening thud shook the floor on Nathan's side, as if something heavy had been dropped, the sound reverberating through the house like a thunderclap. Feel the house tremble, as if it's alive with fury. Nathan's face drained of color, his skepticism shattered in an instant. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice trembling for the first time since they'd moved in, his hands gripping hers as if she were the only anchor in a storm. They moved their bedroom to another part of the house the next day, turning the old room into a storage, space they rarely entered, hoping distance would shield them from the attic's reach. Picture a couple fleeing the dark, clinging to fragile hope. The incidents lessened. The voice fell silent, the shadows retreated, But the Crimson Attic remained a scar on their peace, its presence a constant reminder of the terror they'd endured. The door to the attic still opened on its own, its hinges groaning in the night, the red interior a silent taunt that seemed to mock their attempts at normalcy. Elise would stand at the bottom of the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest, and speak into the darkness, her voice firm despite the fear that clawed at her throat. "You're not welcome here," she'd say, her words a desperate plea, a fragile shield against the unknown. Feel the Red Room listening, its whisper waiting for the right moment. The house stayed quiet, but Elise knew the truth. Some rooms never let go, their secrets woven into the walls, their whispers a promise of terrors yet to come, a crimson heartbeat that echoed through her dreams. You're gathered with friends in a dim basement, the Ouija board glowing under candlelight. It's just a game, a laugh, until it speaks a name no one could know, a name that comes true. Days later, your sister screams, her eyes fixed on the floor, stairs where black cloven hooves descend attached to nothing. You didn't believe in demons before, but now you do, and they know you called them. The summer we were 14, my best friend Ethan and his crew were obsessed with pushing boundaries. They were the metalheads of our junior high, leather jackets, band tees, always blasting music that made the ear. Windows rattle. Ethan's basement was their sanctuary, a cluttered space of old couches, posters, and the faint smell of incense and stale soda. One Friday night, bored and restless, they decided to play with a Ouija board. It wasn't serious, just a dare, a way to mock the ghost stories we'd all heard. Ethan told me about it later, his voice low, his eyes haunted. What started as a joke became something none of them could shake. You think it's just a game, don't you? But some doors, once opened, don't close. They set up in the basement, the air thick with the flicker of candles, their shadows dancing on the walls. Ethan, his girlfriend Mia, and two others, Jake and Sarah, huddled around the board, their fingers trembling on the planchette. At first it was nonsense, random letters, gibberish answers to questions like, "Who's here?" or "What's my future?" They laughed, accusing each other of pushing the planchette, their voices loud, to drown out the unease creeping in. Then Sarah, whose cousin was a taekwondo champ, asked a question only she knew the answer to. "What's the name of my cousin's rival in the tournament next week?" The planchette moved, slow and deliberate, spelling out Karina. Sarah scoffed, shaking her head. "That's wrong, her rival's Jenna." They mocked the board, calling it a scam, and moved on. "You want to test it, don't you? To see how far it'll go." They asked one final question. "Who are you?" The planchette slid faster now, spelling a name Ethan couldn't recall exactly. But he said it felt wrong, sharp, guttural, like something you'd hear in a nightmare. The candles flickered, the air growing heavy, but they ended the session, shoving the board under Ethan's bed. It was a weekend, a fleeting thrill they thought they'd forget, but Monday changed everything. At school, Sarah pulled them aside, her face pale. "The tournament," she said, her voice shaking. "Jenna dropped out last minute. My cousin's new rival is named Karina, with a C." The name was one letter off, a detail no one could have known, a name too rare to guess. The group froze, their laughter gone, replaced by a cold realization. The board had known. You feel it now, don't you? The truth sinking in. The weeks that followed were cursed. Ethan's bike tire blew out, nearly throwing him into traffic. Mia's phone shattered. When it fell from her pocket, though she swore it was secure. Jake slipped in the school parking lot, a black car swerving just in time to miss him. Sarah lost her house keys, only to find them days later in a drawer she never used. They didn't talk about it, didn't tell their parents. but the weight of their secret grew, a shadow trailing them. Ethan said it felt like they'd invited something in, something that lingered, watching, waiting. You shouldn't have touched the board. You know that now. The worst came one evening at Ethan's house. He was at his computer, tucked under the staircase in the living room, the glow of the screen casting blue light across his face. His older sister, Lily, was sprawled on the couch, watching some reality show, the TV's hum filling the space. The staircase above Ethan was open, its steps visible from Lily's spot. She glanced up, distracted by a movement, expecting their mom coming down. Instead, she saw legs, black cloven like a goat's moving slowly, deliberately down the stairs. Her heart skipped, her mind scrambling. Mom's messing with us, she thought, forcing a smile, waiting for a costume, a prank. But as the legs reached the lower steps where the ceiling no longer blocked her view, there was nothing above them. No body, no head, just those hooves, stepping with purpose. The air turned cold, the TV's sound warping into static. Lily screamed, a raw, guttural sound, her body shaking as she curled into the couch, tears streaming. Ethan spun around, seeing nothing but his sister's terror, her eyes fixed on the now empty stairs. You see it in her face, don't you? The fear of something real. Lily couldn't speak for hours, her sobs broken by gasps, her hands clutching Ethan's arm. She described the legs, the way they moved, the way the air felt wrong, like it was pressing against her skin. Ethan didn't see them, but he felt it. The same heaviness from that night with the board, the same sense of being watched. He told me later, his voice barely above a whisper, that he burned the Ouija board the next day, scattering its ashes in the woods. But the feeling lingered, a stain on their house, their lives. Lily refused to sleep alone for weeks, her eyes always darting to the stairs. You can't unsee it. It's part of you now. I heard this story from Ethan years later over coffee, his hands still fidgeting when he spoke. I'd laughed at Ouija boards before, dismissed them as toys, but his story changed me. I remembered a night in my own childhood, playing with a makeshift board, feeling a chill I couldn't explain. Nothing happened then, but Ethan's words brought it back, sharp and vivid. You're thinking about it now, aren't you? The board you touched, the door you might have opened. I don't touch Ouija boards anymore. I don't laugh at them either. Because Ethan's right. Some things answer when you call, and they don't leave when you're done. Don't touch the board. Don't say its name. The darkness on that coastal road was a living thing, swallowing every shred of safety I thought I had. I was 17, a new stable hand at a racehorse trainer's barn, my days beginning long before the sun dared to rise. It was late winter, January's grip still tight on the world, and the only way to get to work was a grueling bike ride through the pre-dawn chill. The road I took wound along the coastline, a series of sweeping curves that hugged the cliff face on one side, its jagged stone unyielding, while the other side dropped sharply to the sea, guarded only by flimsy railings that offered no real protection. The air was heavy with the tang of salt, the ocean's breath a constant whisper in my ears, and the darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint beam of my bike's headlight, a fragile thread of light in an endless void. I pedaled steadily, my breath fogging in the icy air, my legs burning against the slight uphill climb. The road was desolate, its curves stretching into the distance, the silence broken only by the rhythmic creak of my bike and the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. I'd grown used to the solitude, the way the night seemed to press in close, but that morning something felt different. A prickle on the back of my neck, a sense that I wasn't as alone as I thought. My headlight caught a flicker of movement ahead. A figure walking along the road, their back to me, their form outlined in the dim glow. They were dressed in jeans and a dark jacket, a backpack slung over one shoulder. Their steps slow and deliberate, as if they had all the time in the world. I squinted, trying to make sense of their presence, my mind racing with questions. Who would be out here at this hour, walking on a road this dangerous? I slowed my pace, my tires humming softly against the asphalt, my breath steadying as I tried not to startle them. They were on the wrong side of the road, walking against traffic. But the cliff on the other side offered little safety either, its sheer drop a constant threat. The area was rural, the nearest village still miles away, and I reasoned they might be heading there to catch a bus, a worker like me braving the early hours for a paycheck. I watched them for what felt like an eternity, their silhouette growing clearer with every turn of my pedals, their movement steady, almost hypnotic, in the beam of my light. I was close now, close enough to call out, and I did, my voice cutting through the stillness with a forced cheerfulness. "Morning," I shouted, hoping to ease the tension that had settled in my chest, hoping they'd turn and acknowledge me, a fellow traveler in the dark. But they didn't turn. They didn't stop. They didn't even falter. One moment they were there, a solid figure against the gray dawn, and the next, they were gone. Not faded, not hidden by a curve in the road, but gone, as if the darkness had reached out and swallowed them whole. My breath caught, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin as my bike wobbled beneath me, my hands trembling on the handlebars. I braked hard, my tires skidding against the asphalt, my eyes darting across the road, searching for any sign of them. A shadow, a footprint, anything to prove I hadn't imagined it. But the road was empty. The cliff face on one side, the railings on the other, and the sea below, its waves a distant roar that seemed to mock my panic. They couldn't have jumped, couldn't have climbed. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, and yet they were gone, erased from the world as if they'd never been. I sat there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, the cold air biting into my lungs as I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. The road stretched out before me, its curves disappearing into the darkness, and for the first time I felt the true weight of its isolation, the way it seemed to exist outside the rules of the world I knew. I'd heard stories of ghosts on these roads, whispers of figures that appeared and vanished, but I'd never believed them until that moment. The fear that gripped me was raw, primal, a certainty that what I'd seen wasn't human, wasn't alive, but something else, something that belonged to the shadows of this forsaken place. I pedaled on, my legs shaking, the remaining miles to work a blur of adrenaline and dread, my mind replaying the moment they disappeared, the way the darkness had claimed them without a trace. That experience changed me, etched itself into my memory like a scar I can't erase. I told my boss what happened, my voice trembling as I recounted the story, and he took it seriously enough to arrange a ride for me with another employee, a kindness I'll never forget. I never cycled that road again, never wanted to feel that bone-deep terror, the certainty that I'd crossed paths with something beyond understanding. I've had other strange experiences in my life, odd noises, feelings of unease, but nothing compares to that morning, to the phantom on the coastal road who walked with the living and vanished with the dead. It was a ghost, I'm sure of it, a memory of someone who once walked that path, now bound to its shadows, a silent reminder that some roads are never truly empty, no matter how alone you think you are. The morning silence in our house was a lie, hiding a voice that wasn't ours. I woke to that truth on a chilly May morning in 2025, in the old house on Cedar Avenue where I'd grown up. The air was crisp, the dawn light barely seeping through the curtains, casting long shadows across my bedroom. At 5:30 a.m., I heard the familiar rumble of my mother Margaret's car as she left for work, the sound fading into the stillness of the early hour. Step into that quiet with me. Feel its weight settle around you. But the quiet in our house had always been deceptive, a mask for something I'd felt since I was a child. A presence, unseen but ever present, its whispers and shadows a constant in my life. I'd always known something lived with us. You felt it too, haven't you? That prickling on your neck, the sense of eyes where there are none. As a boy, I'd hear footsteps in the attic, soft and deliberate, pacing above my room at night. Grandma Ruth, who lived with us back then, would brush it off as the house settling, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Once I saw a shadow in the hallway, tall and formless, gone when I blinked, leaving behind a chill that lingered for hours. Margaret had felt it too. Objects moved, doors creaked open on their own, the air sometimes heavy with a scent like damp earth. We'd grown used to it, a quiet haunt that never spoke, never showed itself fully. Until that morning. At 6 a.m., the garbage truck rolled down our street, its engine a low growl that stirred Max, our golden retriever, from his sleep in the living room. Hear that bark, sharp and urgent, cutting through the dawn. Max erupted into a frenzy, his deep barks echoing through the house, a warning of something he sensed but I couldn't see. I lay in bed, the covers pulled tight, willing him to stop, my mind foggy with the remnants of sleep. Then, clear as a bell, a woman's voice rang out from the living room, sharp and commanding. Be quiet. Feel that voice now, its tone slicing through the air, cold and unyielding. My heart stopped, my breath catching in my throat as the house fell silent. Max's barking ceased instantly, replaced by a stillness so profound it felt alive, watching, waiting. I sat up, the air in my room suddenly heavy, the scent of damp. Earth stronger now, clinging to the back of my throat. You've smelled that before, haven't you? The earth after rain, but wrong, too old, too cold. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I texted Margaret, needing to confirm what I already knew. Are you still home? I typed, my pulse racing. Her reply came quickly, her words a confirmation of my fear. No, I left at 5:30. Why? I stared at the screen, the silence around me growing heavier, the woman's voice echoing in my mind. A voice that didn't belong to Margaret, to Grandma Ruth, to anyone I knew. You've heard something like that, haven't you? A sound that shouldn't be, but is clear and real. I crept to the living room, the floorboards cold against my bare feet, the dim light of dawn casting faint shadows on the walls. Max lay by the couch, his head down, his eyes wide and alert, as if he too felt the weight of that voice. The room was empty, the air thick with that unexplainable chill, the same chill I'd felt as a child when the shadows moved. I searched the house, my heart pounding, checking every corner, every closet, but found nothing. No one who could have spoken, no sign of an intruder. Feel that emptiness, the way it presses against you, heavier than it should be. The crawl space was sealed, the attic door too loud to open without notice. It was just me, Max, and the voice that had no source. Margaret called me later that day, her voice tense as I told her what happened. Let me take you back to her story, the one she'd kept hidden. A week earlier, she'd been asleep in her room, when a woman's voice jolted her awake, sharp and clear, saying, "Oh," right beside her ear. She'd bolted upright, her heart racing, searching the dark for a source, but found nothing. She'd thought she was losing her mind, dismissing it as a dream, until my story confirmed her fear. You know that feeling, don't you? When the impossible becomes undeniable, and you're left with the truth. The presence in our house, the one we'd lived with for over a decade, had changed. It wasn't just whispers and shadows anymore. It was speaking, acting, its voice a command that Max had obeyed without question. I don't know why it's different now, why after all these years it's making itself known. Some secrets wait, don't they? They bide their time, growing stronger in the dark. Margaret and I are left with questions, with a fear that grows with every unanswered moment. What does it want? Why now? And how do we stop it before it speaks again? When the storm rages, the past doesn't stay buried. It walks among the living. Nora huddled on the worn sectional sofa in the basement, her fingers clutching the edge of a frayed blanket as the storm roared outside. It was a humid summer evening in 2007, the kind where the air felt thick with tension, heavy with the promise of chaos. She was 13, her younger brother Caleb, just 12, sitting beside her, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. Their family home, a modest 2-story house in a small town, had been battered by thunderstorms all week. The sky a bruised canvas of dark clouds that unleashed torrents of rain and jagged bolts of lightning. Feel the storm's fury, shaking the walls around you. That night the power had finally given out, plunging the house into darkness, the only light coming from flickering candles and the occasional flash of lightning that pierced through the small basement windows. The basement was their refuge, a cozy space filled with old furniture and the faint, musty scent of damp concrete. Nora and Caleb had retreated there with their younger siblings, the 7-year-old twins, who were now asleep on a pile of blankets in the corner. Their parents, Henry and Evelyn, were in the garage, struggling to start the generator, their muffled voices barely audible over the storm's relentless howl. Picture a family, trapped in the dark, unaware of what the storm has summoned. Nora tried to focus on the game they'd been playing, a makeshift version of charades using a flashlight, to cast shadows on the wall, but the storm's ferocity made her uneasy, each clap of thunder sending a shiver down her spine. Caleb, always the braver one, suggested they grab a board game from their shared bedroom upstairs. "I don't want to go alone," he admitted, his voice low, his eyes darting toward the stairs. Nora nodded, sensing his fear of the dark, and together they climbed the steps, leaving the basement's faint candlelight behind. The tiled hallway connecting the basement to the kitchen was pitch black, the air cool and heavy with the scent of rain seeping through the cracks. They turned left, facing the staircase that led to the second floor, a short climb of 10 steps, unassuming in the daylight, but now a shadowy ascent into the unknown. Hold your breath. Feel the darkness press closer. Nora led the way, her flashlight, beam trembling in her hand, its weak light barely cutting through the gloom. She was halfway up the stairs when a sudden, bone-deep chill washed over her, a primal instinct screaming that something was wrong. Before she could turn back, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the house, its harsh white light flooding the hallway above. And there at the top of the stairs stood a woman. Look up. See what shouldn't be there. Nora froze, her breath catching in her throat as the woman's form came into sharp focus, etched against the lightning's glow. She wore a long skirt that brushed the floor, its fabric faded and frayed, and a button-up shirt with delicate lace at the collar, the style reminiscent of decades past, perhaps the 1920s or earlier, though Nora couldn't place it exactly. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, strands escaping to frame a face that Nora couldn't fully see, turned slightly toward her brother's room. The woman stood motionless, her presence both ethereal and unnervingly solid, as if she belonged to the house in a way Nora never would. Feel the air grow heavy, charged with her gaze. Caleb gasped behind her, his hand gripping her arm so tightly it hurt. his flashlight beam shaking as it landed on the woman's form. The lightning faded, plunging them back into darkness. But the afterimage of the woman burned into Nora's mind, her silhouette a haunting imprint against the black. Panic surged through Nora, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might burst. "Run!" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm, and they bolted down the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the tiled hallway as they raced back to the living room. They collapsed onto the couch, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their eyes wide with terror as they stared into the darkness, half expecting the woman to follow. Feel the storm's pulse, mirroring your own. But the house remained silent, the only sounds the relentless rain and the distant rumble of thunder. The fear lingered, a cold weight in Nora's chest as she replayed the moment over and over. The woman's stillness, her outdated clothes, the way she seemed to belong to another time. Caleb's voice trembled as he whispered, "Who was that?" Nora shook her head, unable to answer, her mind racing with stories her grandmother used to tell. Tales of spirits tied to old houses, lingering where they once lived. The rest of the night passed in a haze of unease, but no further disturbances came. Henry and Evelyn finally got the generator running, its hum a comforting reminder of the present, and the siblings distracted themselves with a game on their newly charged Nintendo Wii, trying to erase the memory of what they'd seen. Picture two children clinging to normalcy, haunted by a glimpse of the past. But Nora couldn't forget the woman, her image etched into her memory like a photograph. Months later, the woman appeared again, this time in a fleeting moment as Nora passed the hallway, her figure illuminated by a soft glow that had no source. She stood at the same spot, her expression unreadable, but there was no malice in her presence, only a quiet curiosity, as if she were watching over them. Feel. Her gaze gentle yet unyielding. Evelyn, who'd grown up hearing tales of the house's history, later told Nora she believed the woman was a spirit tied to the home, a former resident who meant no harm. Over the years, her appearances became a strange comfort, a reminder that not all shadows in the storm are born of fear. Some are simply echoes of lives long gone, seeking to be remembered. You're pedaling through the dark, the icy wind biting your face, your bike's feeble light slicing through the fog. Ahead, a figure walks, solid and real, their boots crunching on the coastal road. You call out, your voice swallowed by the roar of the sea below. And then in an instant they're gone, not faded, not hidden, just gone. You're alone now, but the air feels heavier, as if something's still walking beside you. 29 winters ago I was 17, reckless and eager, with a new job at a horse trainer's stable in a rural stretch of coastline. The work meant early mornings long before dawn, and I decided to cycle the 6 miles to save money. The road was a winding ribbon, flanked by a sheer cliff on one side and a steep drop to the churning sea on the other, its railings rusted and bent. In late January, the world was a void of black, the air sharp with salt and frost, the only sound the howl of wind and the rhythmic creak of my pedals. I'd never been afraid of the dark, not until that morning, when the road showed me something. Couldn't explain. You think you're alone out there, don't you? But some things wait for you to notice them. It was around 4 a.m., the sky a starless expanse, my breath fogging in the cold. My bike's headlamp cast a narrow beam, barely, piercing the fog that clung to the road like a living thing. I was climbing a slight incline, my legs burning, when the light caught something ahead. A figure, walking steadily, their back to me. They wore jeans, a dark bomber jacket, and a backpack, the kind you'd see on someone hiking to the village, for a bus. Their steps were deliberate, boots scuffing the gravelly edge of the road. I squinted, my heart ticking faster. It wasn't unusual. People walked these roads, especially in rural areas with no early buses, but something felt off. They were on the wrong side, too close to the cliff with no room to step aside. You see them, don't you? But do they see you? I slowed, keeping my distance, my breath shallow to hide the strain of the climb. The figure didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me, just kept walking, their silhouette sharp against the fog. I studied them, noting the way the jacket hung loose, the backpack swaying slightly with each step. They were solid, real, not a trick of the light or my tired eyes. I told myself they were just a worker, a fisherman maybe, heading to town. But the road was too quiet, too empty. The seas roared too loud in my ears. My lamp flickered, the beam wavering, and for a moment I thought I saw their shadow stretch longer than it should. I shook it off, focusing on the rhythm of their steps, the crunch of gravel under their boots. You're getting closer now. You want to call out, don't you? I was maybe 10 feet behind, close enough to see the frayed hem of their jeans, when I decided to speak. I didn't want to startle them, not on a road with a cliff to one side and a drop to the other. "Morning," I called, my voice thin against the wind, forcing a casual tone. I waited for a nod, a wave, anything, but the figure didn't turn, didn't pause. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, they were gone. Not faded, not stepped. Off the road. Gone. The space where they'd been was empty, the gravel untouched, the fog swirling as if nothing had ever been there. My bike wobbled, my hands gripping the handlebars, my breath catching in my throat. I stopped, my feet hitting the ground, my lamp sweeping the road. Nothing. No tracks, no sound. Just the sea crashing below and the wind howling through the cliffs. You felt it, didn't you? The moment the world changed. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. The road stretched ahead, empty, the fog curling like fingers around my bike. I wanted to scream, to pedal back, but my legs wouldn't move. The air felt heavier, charged, like the silence. Before a storm, I kept replaying it. The jacket, the backpack, the steady steps. Searching for a flaw, a trick. Maybe they'd jumped the railing, dropped to the sea. But the railings were intact. The drop too steep, the water too far below. Maybe I'd imagined, but I hadn't. I'd seen them clear as day for 3, maybe 4 minutes, solid as the road itself, and now they were gone, leaving only the echo of their steps in my mind. You can't explain it away. You know what you saw. I don't remember starting to pedal again, but I did, faster now, the cold burning my lungs. The road seemed longer, the cliffs closer, the sea louder, as if the world was closing in. I kept glancing back, expecting to see them, walking, watching, waiting. But there was nothing, just darkness and fog. When I reached the stable, my hands were shaking, my face numb. I told my boss I'd felt sick, my voice barely steady. He didn't ask questions, just nodded. And later that week I arranged a ride, with a coworker. I never cycled that road again. Never wanted to feel that weight, that certainty that something was out there, something that didn't belong. You're safe now, aren't you? But you'll never forget. Years later, I told a friend over beers, expecting laughter. Instead, he went quiet, his eyes distant. He'd grown up near that coast, he said, and heard stories. Fishermen who vanished, walkers seen on cliffs who were never found. That road's old, he said, his voice low. Older than the town, things linger there. His words brought it back, sharp and vivid. The figure's silhouette burned into my memory. I don't talk about it much, but when I do, my hands still shake, my eyes dart to the shadows. Because I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't human. Look behind you. Is the road still empty? Some nights refuse to let you sleep. They hold you captive, their shadows whispering secrets you were never meant to hear. I was 14 when the darkness first claimed me, in the house I shared with my father, a place that should have been a refuge but became a stage for nightmares. Every night, without fail, I'd wake at exactly 2:17 a.m., my eyes snapping open as if pulled by an unseen hand, my heart racing with a fear I couldn't name. The room was always the same, shrouded in the dim glow of a street lamp filtering through. The curtains, the air heavy with a stillness that felt alive, pressing against my skin like a weight I couldn't shake. And every time I felt it, a presence lurking in the right corner of my room, its gaze boring into me, unseeing yet all-seeing. A silent watcher that knew I was awake, knew I was afraid. It started when my younger brother Ethan and I swapped rooms, a decision that seemed innocent enough at the time. My new room was smaller, its walls lined with peeling wallpaper, the floor creaking with every step, but it was mine, or so I thought. From that first night, the pattern began. The clock on my nightstand glowing 2:17 a.m. in harsh red digits, a cruel reminder of my sleepless torment. I'd lie there, frozen, my breath shallow, waiting for the feeling to pass, but it never did. The presence was always there, invisible yet undeniable, its weight a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind in the dead of night, but the fear was too real, too visceral to dismiss. When I stayed at my mother's house, the nights were peaceful, the clock ticking past 2:17 without a whisper of unease. But in my father's house, the watcher was relentless, its gaze a chain that bound me to the dark. The house began to reveal its secrets in small, insidious ways, as if the watcher was testing me, toying with my sanity. I was at my mother's one weekend when my father called, his voice tight with a mix of confusion and concern. "Your alarm clock radio turned on by itself last night," he said. Full volume in the middle of the night. It woke us all up. I hadn't been home in days, hadn't touched the radio, but the thought of it blaring in my empty room sent a shiver down my spine, a cold dread that settled in my bones. Another day, I was playing in the driveway with Ethan, our laughter a fragile shield against the world. When he ran inside to use the bathroom, I stayed outside, kicking a ball against the garage door, when a tennis ball came flying out of the garage, rolling to a stop at my feet. My heart lurched. Ethan was nowhere near the garage and no one else was home. But the ball was there, a silent message from something that shouldn't have been. The incidents grew bolder, more menacing, as if the watcher was growing impatient, its presence seeping into the fabric of our lives. When my parents went on vacation, leaving the house empty, my grandmother would check in, her visits a comforting routine in the midst of the chaos. But each time she returned, she'd find a new light on, its glow a stark contrast to the darkened house she'd left behind. The last night before my parents returned, she triple-checked every switch, ensuring the house was dark. But when my parents arrived home, every light blazed, a silent defiance of her efforts. My grandmother swore the house was cursed, her voice trembling as she refused to set foot in it again. And I couldn't blame her. The house felt alive, its walls humming with a malice I couldn't explain. The watcher's games turned dangerous, its intent no longer subtle but threatening, a predator toying with its prey. One night my older brother Caleb and I were home alone, Ethan at a sleepover when we heard it. Footsteps, rapid and heavy, running up and down the stairs, the sound echoing through the house like a heartbeat. We froze, our eyes meeting in shared terror, the air thick with a presence we couldn't see. We tried to dismiss it, to convince ourselves it was nothing, but the house had other plans. The next morning, we discovered the gas stove burners had been turned on low overnight, a faint hiss of gas lingering in the air, a silent threat that could have ended us all. My father, who had always been skeptical, began to believe after that, his own encounter sealing his conviction. He'd heard whispers in the hallway one night, faint and unintelligible, and found my TV on, its screen glowing with static, voices murmuring from the speakers despite the remote lying untouched on the nightstand. The final act came one evening, a moment that shattered any doubt we had left, a message from the watcher that we couldn't ignore. I just stepped out of the shower, the bathroom filled with steam, the mirror fogged over with a haze that distorted my reflection. I wrapped a towel around myself and headed to my room to change, the air cool against my damp skin, when Caleb knocked on my door, his voice urgent. "What did you write on the mirror?" he asked, his tone a mix of confusion and fear. I frowned, following him back to the bathroom, my heart sinking as I saw it, letters forming on the fogged glass, slow and deliberate, as if an unseen hand was tracing each stroke. The whole family gathered, our breaths shallow, as the message took shape. "I am watching." The words burned into my mind, a declaration of intent, a promise that the watcher was here, that it saw us, that it knew us. Below the message, another word appeared, but it was too faint, too smeared to decipher, a final taunt from the darkness. After that night, the occurrences stopped, as abruptly as they had begun, the house falling into a silence that felt more ominous than the chaos before. I stopped waking at 2:17 a.m., the presence in the corner of my room gone, but the fear remained, a shadow that lingered in the quiet moments. A year later, my father called me, his voice heavy with a revelation that turned my blood to ice. "Didn't you always say Ethan was connected to the haunting?" he asked, and I nodded, my throat tight. I found his birth certificate. Ethan was born at exactly 2:17 a.m. The coincidence was too stark, too precise to ignore, a thread that tied the watcher to my brother, a connection I couldn't unsee. 2 years ago, I sought out a psychic medium, desperate for answers, and she confirmed my worst fears. The entity had targeted me because I acknowledged it, but it was tied to Ethan, attached to something, or someone, that had since left the, house. "The watcher is gone," she said, "but I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, waiting for the clock to strike 2:17 a.m. once more." The night felt too still, as if it were waiting to unleash something terrible. I sensed that on a cool May evening in 2025, driving home through the quiet streets of Elmwood Park, a neighborhood I'd always thought was safe. It was 9:30 p.m., the sky a deep indigo, the streetlights casting pools of orange light on the pavement. I'd just dropped off my oldest friend Jenna after a night out, her laughter still echoing in my mind as I turned onto my street. Step into that night with me, feel the air grow heavy around you. But the peace of the evening shattered when I reached my house, a modest 2-story home with a garage that faced the side street, a street that had felt safe until now. I'd seen him before, the intruder lurking near our house a week earlier. You've felt that unease, haven't you? The kind that prickles your skin when someone watches too closely. It was late, past midnight, when I'd spotted him through my bedroom window, a shadowy figure pacing near the free library my parents had set up in our yard. His movements were deliberate, his head turning toward our house as if searching for something, or someone. I'd opened the window, my voice sharp with bravado, shouting that I'd seen him, that he'd better leave before I called the cops. He'd vanished into the darkness, and I'd thought that was the end of it, a petty thief scared off by a bluff. But that night, as I pulled into the driveway, I knew I'd been wrong. I parked the car, the engine's hum fading into the stillness, and stepped out, my sneakers soft on the gravel. The street was empty, the new houses being built nearby glowing faintly with construction lights, a detail I barely noticed as I headed toward the front door. Then it came, a loud, hollow bang echoing from the side of the house, near the garage. Hear that sound now, sharp and jarring, cutting through the night. My heart lurched, my breath catching as I froze, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. The noise came again, rhythmic, deliberate, a sound that didn't belong. A metallic thud against the garage door, each strike reverberating through the quiet street. I crept toward the sound, my pulse racing, my mind screaming to run, but my feet moving forward, drawn by a need to know. You've felt that pull, haven't you? The need to face the danger, even when it terrifies you. The side window overlooked the garage, and I crouched low, peering through the glass, my breath fogging. The pain. There he was, the intruder, cloaked in black, a hood pulled low over his face, his figure a dark smear against the faint streetlight glow. He held a crowbar, its metal gleaming as he swung it against the garage door, each strike a violent promise, the sound echoing in my chest like a drumbeat of fear. See him there, a shadow made real, his intent written in every blow. I stumbled back, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my phone, the cold air biting at my skin, the scent of damp grass, mixing with my panic. I dialed 911, my voice a whisper as I described the scene, my words tripping over each other in a rush of terror. The operator's calm voice grounded me, promising help, but the banging continued, each strike louder, more insistent, as if the intruder knew I was there, knew I was watching. Feel that terror now, the way it coils in your gut, unyielding. I ducked behind the couch, my ear pressed to the floor, my fingers clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed in a moment of desperation, its weight cold and useless against the fear that gripped me. Then, as suddenly as it began, the banging stopped. I peered out the window again, my heart in my throat, and saw him running, his dark figure disappearing into the shadows of the side street, the crowbar glinting one last time before he was gone. Let me take you back to a night I've tried to forget. When I was 12, a neighbor's house had been broken into, the family asleep as a thief slipped through their back door, taking nothing but leaving behind a fear that lingered for years. I'd heard the stories, seen the police lights, felt the weight of that violation. Now it was my home, my sanctuary, and the intruder had come too close. The police arrived minutes later, their flashlights sweeping the yard, their voices calm, but firm as they took my statement. My parents, Mark and Ellen, were woken by the commotion, their faces pale with fear as they listened, Ellen's hand gripping mine, Mark's jaw tight with anger. The garage door was dented, the paint scratched, a testament to the intruder's intent, but he hadn't gotten in. The inner door to the house, always left unlocked, a habit we'd never thought to change, remained untouched. You've felt that relief, haven't you? The kind that's tainted by lingering fear. Mark ordered 4 exterior cameras that night, his voice resolute. But I could see the worry in his eyes, the same worry that mirrored my own. We're not safe yet. Some threats don't vanish, do they? They linger, waiting for the next chance. The intruder is still out there, his purpose unclear, his target, whether it's me or our house, unknown. The cameras are up now, their red lights blinking in the dark, but every shadow feels like him, every noise a warning. I don't know what he wants, but I know this: he'll be back and we'll be ready. Some houses don't welcome you. They claim you as their own. Ava stood in the kitchen of her new home, her hands trembling as she clutched a glass of water. the air around her thick with an unspoken presence. It was 2023, and she'd moved into this modest suburban house with her mother, Lila, just under 2 years ago. A fresh start after a turbulent time, a place meant to be a sanctuary. But the kitchen and living room, an open space that should have felt warm and inviting, held a darkness that seeped into her bones, a constant suffocating dread that followed her every move. Step into the silence. Feel the eyes that aren't there. The house was surrounded by dense trees on 3 sides, its isolation a double-edged sword, peaceful yet eerily quiet, as if the world beyond had faded away, leaving her trapped with something unseen. The disturbances began just a few months after they settled in, subtle at first, like whispers on the edge of perception. Picture a young woman, hopeful for a new beginning, unaware of the shadows that linger. Ava and Lila had spent their first weeks unpacking, filling the house with laughter and the scent of fresh paint. But the kitchen always felt off, a chill that lingered in the air, a heaviness that pressed against her chest. One night, as Ava slept, Lila woke at 3 a.m., her heart racing as a faint tinkling sound drifted from the kitchen. She crept out of her first-floor bedroom, her bare feet cold against the hardwood, and froze at the sight. The wind chimes hanging above the kitchen counter swayed gently, their delicate metal tubes catching the moonlight, moving as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. Listen to the chimes, hear the house speak. Lila's breath caught, her hands trembling as she reached up to still them. But the air was still, the windows sealed tight. She took the chimes down the next day, her face pale, her voice unsteady as she told Ava, "Something's not right. Here." The incidents escalated, each one more unnerving than the last. One crisp November evening, Ava sat on the living room couch with her then-girlfriend Mara, the TV casting a soft glow over the room as they watched a sitcom, their laughter a fragile shield against the house's oppressive silence. They'd been there for nearly an hour when a sudden movement jolted Ava from her comfort. The lunchbox she'd left on top of the refrigerator flew off, landing 5 feet away on the kitchen floor with a jarring thud. Freeze where you stand. Feel the air shift around you. Ava's heart leapt into her throat, her eyes wide as she stared at the lunchbox. Its lid popped open, spilling a few stray crumbs onto the tiles. Mara clutched her arm, her voice a whisper. "What was that?" Ava stood, her legs shaky, and picked up the lunchbox, placing it back on the fridge, her hands trembling as she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was unbalanced, maybe it slipped, but deep down she knew better. The house had moved it, a silent declaration of its presence, and the weight of that knowledge settled into her bones like a cold fog. The true terror came one evening as Ava returned from a workout in the basement, her body aching but her mind alert, the house's silence pressing against her like a physical force. She climbed the stairs to the kitchen, her protein shaker in hand, and stood at the sink, rinsing strawberries under the cool water, the tart scent filling the air. Look out the window, see what shouldn't be. The backyard was cloaked in darkness, the trees beyond a wall of shadows, but as Ava glanced up, her reflection in the window revealed something else. A blurry black figure, moving at an inhuman speed, sprinting from one side of the living room to the other behind her. It was a fleeting glimpse, less than a second, but the speed was unnatural, like a predator darting through the night, its form devoid of features, a void of darkness that sucked in the light. Ava spun around, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the running water. But the room was empty, the couch and TV untouched, the air still and heavy. "You're not welcome here," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear, her hands clenched into fists. "This is my house and you need to leave." Feel the words echo, a desperate plea against the dark. She fled upstairs, collapsing onto her bed, her body shaking as she waited for Lila to return. The house's silence now a taunt, a reminder of her vulnerability. The disturbances didn't stop, even after Lila shared her own experiences, footsteps echoing above her basement office. When she knew she was alone, a rhythmic pacing that seemed to mock her every move. Hear the steps, steady and unyielding, a presence that won't be ignored. Lila, shaken but determined, contacted a friend from her church, a woman who specialized in spiritual cleansing, and together they performed a sage ritual, the smoke curling. Through the house, their voices chanting prayers to banish whatever lingered. The air felt lighter for a time, the chimes and shadows retreating, but the footsteps persisted, a faint echo that Ava heard in the early mornings, her heart racing. As she stood at the kitchen counter, the darkness outside a mirror to the fear within. Picture a house cleansed, yet not free, its shadows waiting in silence. One night, Ava invited her new girlfriend Mara and 2 friends over, seeking solace in company. They spent the evening upstairs watching TV, the laughter a fragile shield against the house's weight. But as Ava descended the stairs to use the bathroom, a chill washed over her, the air growing heavy with a presence she couldn't see. Pause on the stairs. Feel the eyes that follow. In the darkness of the living room, she glimpsed a woman's face, smiling unnervingly, formed from the shadows of the laundry piled on the couch. A vision so vivid she froze, her breath catching. As the face seemed to shift, its smile widening into something predatory, she sprinted to the bathroom, her heart pounding, and back upstairs, the image seared into her mind, a haunting reminder of the house's watchful gaze. Feel the stare, unyielding, even in the light. Ava knew then that the house would never let go. Its unseen watcher, a permanent resident. Its presence, a shadow she could never outrun. Some houses don't welcome you. They claim you as their own. Ava stood in the kitchen of her new home, her hands trembling as she clutched a glass of water, the air around her thick with an unspoken presence. It was 2023, and she'd moved into this modest suburban house with her mother, Lila, just under 2 years ago. A fresh start after a turbulent time, a place meant to be a sanctuary. But the kitchen and living room, an open space that should have felt warm and inviting, held a darkness that seeped into her bones, a constant suffocating dread that followed her every move. Step into the silence. Feel the eyes that aren't there. The house was surrounded by dense trees on 3 sides, its isolation a double-edged sword, peaceful yet eerily quiet, as if the world beyond had faded away, leaving her trapped with something unseen. The disturbances began just a few months after they settled in, subtle at first, like whispers on the edge of perception. Picture a young woman, hopeful for a new beginning, unaware of the shadows that linger. Ava and Lila had spent their first weeks unpacking, filling the house with laughter and the scent of fresh paint. But the kitchen always felt off, a chill that lingered in the air, a heaviness that pressed against her chest. One night, as Ava slept, Lila woke at 3 a.m., her heart racing as a faint tinkling sound drifted from the kitchen. She crept out of her first-floor bedroom, her bare feet cold against the hardwood, and froze at the sight. The wind chimes hanging above the kitchen counter swayed gently, their delicate metal tubes catching the moonlight, moving as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. Listen to the chimes, hear the house speak. Lila's breath caught, her hands trembling as she reached up to still them. But the air was still, the windows sealed tight. She took the chimes down the next day, her face pale, her voice unsteady as she told Ava, "Something's not right. Here." The incidents escalated, each one more unnerving than the last. One crisp November evening, Ava sat on the living room couch with her then-girlfriend Mara, the TV casting a soft glow over the room as they watched a sitcom, their laughter a fragile shield against the house's oppressive silence. They'd been there for nearly an hour when a sudden movement jolted Ava from her comfort. The lunchbox she'd left on top of the refrigerator flew off, landing 5 feet away on the kitchen floor with a jarring thud. Freeze where you stand. Feel the air shift around you. Ava's heart leapt into her throat, her eyes wide as she stared at the lunchbox. Its lid popped open, spilling a few stray crumbs onto the tiles. Mara clutched her arm, her voice a whisper. "What was that?" Ava stood, her legs shaky, and picked up the lunchbox, placing it back on the fridge, her hands trembling as she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was unbalanced, maybe it slipped, but deep down she knew better. The house had moved it, a silent declaration of its presence, and the weight of that knowledge settled into her bones like a cold fog. The true terror came one evening as Ava returned from a workout in the basement, her body aching but her mind alert, the house's silence pressing against her like a physical force. She climbed the stairs to the kitchen, her protein shaker in hand, and stood at the sink, rinsing strawberries under the cool water, the tart scent filling the air. Look out the window, see what shouldn't be. The backyard was cloaked in darkness, the trees beyond a wall of shadows, but as Ava glanced up, her reflection in the window revealed something else. A blurry black figure, moving at an inhuman speed, sprinting from one side of the living room to the other behind her. It was a fleeting glimpse, less than a second, but the speed was unnatural, like a predator darting through the night, its form devoid of features, a void of darkness that sucked in the light. Ava spun around, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the running water. But the room was empty, the couch and TV untouched, the air still and heavy. "You're not welcome here," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear, her hands clenched into fists. "This is my house and you need to leave." Feel the words echo, a desperate plea against the dark. She fled upstairs, collapsing onto her bed, her body shaking as she waited for Lila to return. The house's silence now a taunt, a reminder of her vulnerability. The disturbances didn't stop, even after Lila shared her own experiences, footsteps echoing above her basement office. When she knew she was alone, a rhythmic pacing that seemed to mock her every move. Hear the steps, steady and unyielding, a presence that won't be ignored. Lila, shaken but determined, contacted a friend from her church, a woman who specialized in spiritual cleansing, and together they performed a sage ritual, the smoke curling. Through the house, their voices chanting prayers to banish whatever lingered. The air felt lighter for a time, the chimes and shadows retreating, but the footsteps persisted, a faint echo that Ava heard in the early mornings, her heart racing. As she stood at the kitchen counter, the darkness outside a mirror to the fear within. Picture a house cleansed, yet not free, its shadows waiting in silence. One night, Ava invited her new girlfriend Mara and 2 friends over, seeking solace in company. They spent the evening upstairs watching TV, the laughter a fragile shield against the house's weight. But as Ava descended the stairs to use the bathroom, a chill washed over her, the air growing heavy with a presence she couldn't see. Pause on the stairs. Feel the eyes that follow. In the darkness of the living room, she glimpsed a woman's face, smiling unnervingly, formed from the shadows of the laundry piled on the couch. A vision so vivid she froze, her breath catching. As the face seemed to shift, its smile widening into something predatory, she sprinted to the bathroom, her heart pounding, and back upstairs, the image seared into her mind, a haunting reminder of the house's watchful gaze. Feel the stare, unyielding, even in the light. Ava knew then that the house would never let go its unseen watcher, a permanent resident, its presence a shadow she could never outrun. Every night, you wake at exactly 2:17 a.m., your heart pounding, the air thick with the certainty that something's watching from the shadows. You tell yourself it's nothing, but the radio blares on its own, the lights flicker, and words appear on your foggy mirror. I am watching. Then you learn the truth. Your brother was born at 2:17 a.m., and whatever's in your house knows his name. It's not just watching you, it's part of you. When I was 14, my world shifted in ways I couldn't grasp. My parents' divorce had split our lives between two homes, and my younger brother Liam and I decided to swap rooms at our dad's house, a creaky old place with peeling paint and a staircase that groaned under every step. My new room was small, its walls papered in faded blue, a single window overlooking the backyard's gnarled oak. The first night I fell asleep to the hum of crickets, expecting nothing but the usual dreams. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., my eyes snapped open, my chest tight as if an invisible hand had shaken me awake. The room was dark, the air heavy, and from the right corner I felt it, a presence unblinking staring through me. You feel it now, don't you? The weight of eyes you can't see. It happened every night, always at 2:17, like a clock carved into my soul. I'd lie there, my heart racing, scanning the shadows, but nothing moved. It wasn't the warm, fleeting presence I'd felt when my grandmother passed, a comfort in the dark. This was different, cold, invasive, like a stranger, standing too close. I told myself it was just the new room, the divorce, my teenage mind playing tricks. But it only happened at Dad's, never at Mom's, where I slept through the night untouched. The feeling grew, a gnawing dread that whatever watched me knew me, saw me, and wanted me to know it was there. You want to look, don't you? To prove. It's not real. Then the house started to change. One weekend, while I was at Mom's, Dad called, his voice sharp with irritation. My alarm clock radio had blared at 3 a.m., full volume, waking the whole house. "You didn't set it, did you?" he asked. I hadn't been there in days. Back at Dad's, Liam and I were tossing a tennis ball in the driveway when he ran inside to use the bathroom. I turned to grab the ball, only to see it rocket out of the garage, bouncing across the pavement. Liam was still inside, nowhere near the garage. One night I woke to the sound of papers rustling on my desk, though the window was shut tight. Another morning, alone in the kitchen, I watched Dad's sunglasses slide 4 inches across the counter, slow and deliberate, as if pushed by an unseen hand. You see it now, don't you? It's not just in your head. My older brother, Matt, started to notice too. Lights would flicker on in empty rooms, their bulbs humming faintly. We began to see a pattern. The strangeness flared when Liam wasn't home. When our parents went on vacation, leaving us with Grandma, the house seemed to hum with energy. She'd check in daily, always finding a new light on. A hallway, a bedroom, the attic. The last night she swore she'd turned every switch off, triple-checked. When Mom and Dad returned, every light in the house blazed, the air thick with static. Grandma, pale and shaken, called the place cursed and refused to come back. You can't ignore it anymore. It's awake. Matt and I grew jumpy, our nights filled with unease. One evening with Liam at a sleepover, we heard footsteps racing up and down the stairs, fast and heavy like a child running wild. We grabbed flashlights, checked every room, but found nothing. The air felt wrong, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Things escalated when we woke to the smell of gas. The kitchen burners had been turned on low overnight. A silent threat that could have ended us. Matt's skepticism crumbled. No one in our family would play a prank that dangerous. Dad, always the rational one, finally believed too. One night, alone, he heard whispers in the hallway, soft and urgent. Thinking it was a burglar, he grabbed a knife only to find my TV on, its volume low, voices murmuring from a channel I hadn't watched. "You're not alone in this house. You know that now." The final night was the worst. I'd just showered, the bathroom steam clouding the mirror in my room. I was changing when Matt knocked, his voice tense. "What did you write on the mirror?" Confused, I looked. The glass was fogged, but as we watched, letters formed, slow and deliberate, as if traced by an invisible finger. "I am watching." They read, followed by a word we couldn't make out, jagged and wrong. The air grew cold, the room shrinking around us. Mom, Dad, and Matt crowded in, their faces pale as the words lingered. A silent scream. We didn't sleep that night, the house alive with a presence we couldn't name. You saw the words, didn't you? They're burned into you now. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The 217 wake-ups ceased, the light stayed off, the house fell silent. I wanted to believe it was over, but the memory of those words clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. A year later, Dad called, his voice strange. He'd found Liam's birth certificate while sorting papers. "You said the weird stuff was tied to Liam, right?" he asked. I nodded, my throat tight. "He was born at 2:17 a.m., he said, the words hanging heavy. My world tilted, the coincidence too sharp to dismiss. "You feel the connection, don't you?" "It's not a coincidence." 2 years ago, I met a psychic medium, desperate for answers. I told her everything, the wake-ups, the objects, the mirror, Liam's birth. Her eyes darkened, her voice steady. "You saw it because you acknowledged it," she said. "It was tied to your brother, to something he carries or something in that house. It's gone now, but it's still with him, somewhere." Her words chilled me. The idea that Liam, my quiet, gentle brother, might carry something unseen, I don't talk to him about it, don't want to scare him. But sometimes when I visit Dad's, I catch myself watching the corners, waiting for 217. And I wonder, is it really gone? Or is it still watching, waiting for me to look again? Check the clock. What time is it now? Some nightmares don't end when you wake. They linger, their claws sinking deeper into your reality. I've never been the same since that night. A night where the darkness in my room became something more. Something alive. Something that wanted me to know it was there. I'd had sleep paralysis before. A terrifying prison where my body refused to move. My mind trapped between dream and waking. But this time was different. Darker, heavier, as if the air itself had turned against me. It began in the stillness of my bedroom, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, broken only by the faint hum of the LED lights I kept on, their dim glow a fragile shield against the shadows. My sister had experienced something similar the day before, and my mother had spoken of strange sounds in her room all week. But nothing could have prepared me for what was coming. I was lying on my back, a position I usually avoided, knowing how vulnerable it made me, how it invited the paralysis to take hold. The room was bathed in the soft, eerie light of the LEDs, their faint glow casting long shadows across the walls. The curtains hanging heavy at the window, their fabric a dark silhouette against the night beyond. I'd just drifted into a restless sleep when I felt it, a creeping sensation, a heaviness that settled over me, pinning me to the bed as if invisible hands were holding me down. My eyes snapped open, but my body wouldn't move. My limbs locked in place, my chest tight with a fear I couldn't name. I tried to scream, to call for help, but my voice was a prisoner in my throat. my breath shallow and ragged as I scanned the room, searching for the source of the dread that consumed me. There were 3 of them, 3 presences, their forms indistinct but their intent clear, a malice that seeped into the air like poison. One was above me, its weight pressing down on my chest, a suffocating force that made every breath a struggle, its presence a shadow that loomed over me, blocking out the faint light. Another stood in the corner of the room, its silhouette tall and unmoving, a void against the wall that seemed to absorb the glow of the LEDs, its gaze fixed on me with an intensity that burned into my soul. The third was at the door, its form shifting as if trying to force its way in, the knob rattling softly, a sound that echoed in the stillness, a promise of intrusion that sent my heart racing. I fought against the paralysis, my mind screaming for my body to move, my leg twitching with desperate effort, as I muttered a prayer under my breath, a plea for salvation from the terror that held me captive. The air grew colder, a chill that seeped into my bones, and then I saw it. Movement at the window, a swarm of flies, their tiny bodies buzzing against the curtains, a writhing mass that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. They were everywhere, covering the fabric in a black, shimmering veil, their presence a harbinger of death, of decay, a sight that turned my stomach and deepened the terror that gripped me. I'd never seen so many flies, not in my room, not in winter, and the realization hit me like a blow. Something was wrong, something was here, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The weight on my chest grew heavier, a pressure that threatened to crush me, and then I saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of my vision, crawling toward me with a slow, deliberate grace that made my blood run cold. It was a woman, or something that had once been a woman, her form clad in a white sweater and floral pants, the fabric tattered and stained, her movements jerky and unnatural as she climbed onto the bed. Her face was obscured, hidden in the darkness, but her presence was a violation, a desecration, the space that should have been my sanctuary. She moved closer, her hands reaching for me, their touch a promise of something I couldn't face, and I fought harder, my prayer a desperate chant in my mind, a plea for release, for mercy, for light. The paralysis broke at last, a sudden snap that sent me bolt upright, my chest heaving as I gasped for air, my eyes darting to the window, to the corner, to the door, searching for the shadows that had held me captive. But they were gone, or so I thought. The room was empty, the air still heavy with the chill of their presence, but the figures had vanished, leaving me trembling in the aftermath of their assault. And then I saw them, the flies still there, clinging to the curtains, their tiny bodies a stark reminder that this wasn't just a dream, wasn't just a trick of the mind. They buzzed softly, a sound that grated against my nerves, a confirmation of the horror I'd just endured. I stumbled out of bed, my legs shaking, and ran from the room, my heart pounding as I grabbed a can of spray from the kitchen, desperate to erase the evidence of that night, to banish the flies and the memory of the shadows that had come for me. But the questions remain, haunting me as surely as the shadows did. What were they? Why were they here? And why did they leave behind something so real, so undeniable? Prayer was my only escape, my only shield. But I need answers, a way to understand the night the shadows came alive. In the heart of a rural night, the darkness hides more than shadows. It hides monsters. Mara stood on the porch of the guest cabin, the faint glow of her cigarette cutting through the suffocating darkness, a fragile beacon against the chill that seeped into her bones. It was a late summer evening, and she and her mother, Elise, were staying at her Uncle Daniel's ranch. a sprawling haven nestled in a remote corner of the countryside, where dense forests met rugged mountains and open fields stretched into the horizon. The ranch had always been a place of solace, its main house filled with the laughter of family, the animal pens alive with the bleating of goats, and the dog kennel echoing with playful barks. Step into the night, feel the forest's ancient gaze. But tonight, as Mara exhaled a plume of smoke, the air felt heavy with an unspoken warning, a primal instinct whispering that the wilderness around her was not as empty as it seemed. The cabin was a quaint retreat, its wooden walls adorned with faded family photos, the scent of pine lingering in the air like a memory of simpler times. Picture a mother and daughter seeking refuge in a familiar place, unaware of the primal force that watches. Mara and Elise had arrived earlier that day, welcomed by Daniel and his wife Clara, who prepared a hearty meal in the main house. The warmth of their hospitality a stark contrast to the growing unease that settled over the ranch as night fell. The animals grew quiet, their usual nighttime chatter replaced by an eerie stillness that sent a shiver down Mara's spine. She and Elise had retired to the cabin, their two dogs curled up at their feet, their soft snores a comforting rhythm. In the silence, but sleep eluded them, the air thick with a foul odor that seeped through the walls, a sharp, musky stench, like a skunk but heavier, more primal, a scent that spoke of something wild and ancient. The dogs stirred, their ears twitching, their bodies tense as they stared at the door, their silence more unnerving than any bark. Elise's voice trembled as she spoke, her hands gripping her mug of tea. "That smell. It's not natural," she whispered, her eyes darting to the window where the darkness pressed against the glass like a living thing. Mara couldn't ignore the dogs' unease, their restless pacing a mirror to her own growing dread. She stepped outside to smoke, hoping the cool night air would clear her mind. But the darkness beyond the porch light was absolute, a void that seemed to swallow the world. Listen to the silence. Hear what shouldn't be there. She took a drag, the smoke curling upward, when a faint sound broke the stillness. A steady crunch on the gravel parking area echoing from the direction of the forest behind the barn. Her heart quickened, her eyes straining to pierce the night, expecting to see Daniel or Clara checking on the animals, their familiar figures a comforting sight in the dark. But the footsteps were heavier, slower, with a weight that didn't match a human's gait. Each step a deliberate thud that sent a chill racing down her spine. Feel the rhythm of those steps. A hunter's march. Mara froze, her cigarette burning down to her fingers. The sound growing closer, turning toward the cabin, a path that would take it parallel to her position, just beyond the reach of the porch, light's dim glow. As the footsteps neared, Mara's breath caught, her body tensing as a shape emerged from the darkness, just within the edge of the light's reach. Look into the void. See what shouldn't exist. It was a creature, massive and two-legged, its lower half covered in thick, matted fur the color of damp earth, its legs powerful and sinewy, built for strength and speed. Its upper half was a deep, inky black, a shadowy mass that seemed to absorb the light, defying definition, as if the darkness itself had taken form. It stood at least 7 feet tall, its presence a crushing weight that pressed against her chest. Its stench, a rancid mix of decay and wildness, flooding her senses, making her stomach lurch. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs, her cigarette falling to the ground as she pressed herself against the car, her mind reeling with disbelief. Feel the air grow thick, charged with its primal power. The creature moved with a slow, deliberate grace, stepping over the field's gate with ease, its path taking it within 10 feet of her, close enough for her to feel the heat of its presence. The raw, untamed energy that radiated from its form. It didn't turn to look at her, didn't acknowledge her existence, but Mara felt its awareness, a primal instinct that told her it knew she was there, a predator assessing its prey. She stumbled back into the cabin, her hands trembling as she locked the door, her voice a shaky whisper as she turned to Elise. "There's something out there," she stammered, her eyes wide with terror, her body shaking as she recounted what she'd seen. The creature's towering form, its fur covered on legs, its shadowy upper half that seemed to defy reality. Elise's face drained of color, her hands gripping Mara's as they sat in silence. The dogs now whimpering softly, their eyes fixed on the door, their fear a mirror to their own. Picture a mother and daughter, trapped in a fragile shelter, the night alive with terror. The next morning they ventured out, their steps cautious as they searched the ranch for signs of the creature. Tracks in the gravel, broken fences, anything to prove it wasn't a hallucination. The animals were unharmed, the field undisturbed, but the memory of that night clung to Mara like a second skin, its stench haunting her every breath. A month later, they returned, and Elise confided in Clara, her voice trembling as she shared Mara's story, expecting laughter or disbelief. But Clara's expression darkened, her voice low as she admitted her sister had seen something similar years ago. A creature matching Mara's description, lurking in the same field, its presence a haunting echo of the past. Feel the weight of her words, a truth that binds you to the wild. The confirmation sent a shiver down Mara's spine, her nights plagued by the creature's image, its form replaying in her dreams. A reminder that some things in the wilderness don't just pass, but they leave a mark that never fades, a primal fear etched into her soul.